Sarah was 16 when her life took a sharp turn, one that nobody in her little village could have imagined. She lived with her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Okafor, in a small mud house at the far end of the community. Their compound was simple: 2 rooms, a kitchen built with wood, and a backyard where her father planted yam and cassava. They didn't have much, but they shared love, laughter, and evening stories under the moonlight. Sarah was known in the village for her gentle spirit, quick smile, and willingness to help others. Her mother, Mama Sarah, sold roasted corn by the roadside, while her father worked as a palm wine tapper. Every morning, Sarah would help her mother set up the corn stand before heading to school. She always dreamed of finishing her education and helping her family escape poverty. But dreams are fragile things, especially when wealth knocks on the door dressed in a fine wrapper. One hot afternoon, as Mama Sarah was fanning the fire for the roasted corn, a long black SUV pulled up beside the stand. It was Madame Agnes, the richest woman in the area. Everyone respected and feared her. She owned several shops, a big house with high fences, and her only daughter Daisy was said to be living in Port Harcourt, married to a wealthy man. Rumor had it that Daisy had just given birth to twins. Madame Agnes stepped out of the car, wearing a flowing gold lace wrapper, heavy jewelry, and a held tie that sparkled like sunlight on water. She walked toward Mama Sarah, her perfume filling the air. "Mama Sarah," she began with a sweet but commanding tone. "I hear your daughter is a good girl, hardworking and respectful." "Yes, Ma," Mama Sarah replied nervously, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "Sarah is a good child. God gave her to us as a blessing." Madame Agnes smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "My Daisy just gave birth to twins in Port Harcourt. You know, it's not easy for her to take care of 2 babies alone. We need someone trustworthy to help her. I came here to speak to you about Sarah. If she comes with us, she'll live in the city, eat good food, wear fine clothes, and have a better life. We'll take care of her like our own daughter." Mama Sarah's heart leaped. The thought of her daughter living in a big city, away from hardship, sounded like answered prayer. She imagined Sarah wearing beautiful dresses, going to a good school, maybe even sending money back home. "Ah, Madame Agnes, God bless you," she exclaimed. "You remembered us in our poverty. Sarah will go with you. She will serve well." Sarah, who was returning from school with her sandals covered in dust, overheard the last part. She dropped her books and ran to her mother. "Mama, I don't want to go," she said quickly. "I don't know them well. I want to stay and finish my school." Mama Sarah held her hands firmly. "My child, sometimes we must leave the nest to find better. This is a great opportunity. Madame Agnes is not a wicked woman. You'll help Daisy with her babies, and in return, you'll live a better life. Don't worry, you'll be fine." Sarah wanted to argue, but the decision was made. Her father agreed too, saying it was God's way of opening doors. That night, she lay on her thin mattress staring at the thatched roof, feeling a mix of fear and hope. She clutched her small phone tightly, the only gift her uncle had given her, and whispered a prayer, "God, please don't let me suffer." 2 days later, Madame Agnes returned to take Sarah. She refused to allow Sarah to take her phone. "You won't need this in Port Harcourt," she said firmly. "No distractions. You're going there to help, not to play." She also gave Sarah no pocket money, promising that everything she needed would be provided. Sarah's mother didn't question it. She was too excited about her daughter's big break. They drove for hours to Port Harcourt, the city growing busier as they went. Sarah had never seen so many cars, tall buildings, and bustling markets. When they arrived at Daisy's house, Sarah's mouth fell open. It was a beautiful two-story building painted cream and wine, with shiny tiled floors, flower pots at the entrance, and a big gate. Daisy came out to welcome them. She was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, beautiful and well-dressed. She held one of the twins while a maid held the other. "So this is the village girl," Daisy said with a smile. "You look small, but I hope you can work." "Yes, Ma," Sarah replied softly. At first, Daisy seemed kind. She showed Sarah around, pointing to the baby's room, the kitchen, the laundry area, and the big living room with soft chairs. "You will help with the twins, clean, and cook sometimes. Don't worry, you'll get used to it," Daisy said. But as days turned into weeks, Sarah discovered that life in Port Harcourt was nothing like what Madame Agnes had promised. She was made to wake up before 5 a.m. every day. She bathed the babies, washed their clothes by hand, swept and mopped the entire house, cleaned the compound, and sometimes cooked, all before noon. She was only given one small plate of food a day, usually late in the evening. Her stomach would growl painfully through the afternoon as she worked. She was not allowed to use the phone or contact anyone. Madame Agnes and Daisy treated her like a servant, not like family. When she asked for more food, Daisy would sneer. "Do you think you came here to eat? Work first before you open your mouth." At night, while Daisy and her children slept in their comfortable rooms, Sarah was made to sleep on a thin mat in the corridor. There were many empty rooms in the house, but Daisy said, "You don't need a room. This place is enough for someone like you." Sometimes Daisy's friends would visit, and she would introduce Sarah as a house girl from the village, making jokes about her accent and clothes. Sarah swallowed her pain in silence. She didn't want to bring shame to her parents. But deep inside, something was slowly breaking. The first month in Port Harcourt passed like a shadow. Every day blended into the next for Sarah. Early mornings, endless chores, late nights on the cold floor. Daisy's twins cried constantly, and whenever they did, Sarah was blamed. "Why can't you carry them properly?" Daisy would snap. "Are you deaf? Can't you hear the baby crying?" Madame Agnes would bark whenever she visited. Sarah never spoke back. She swallowed the insults like bitter medicine. Each night, when everyone slept, she whispered prayers under her breath, asking God for strength to endure. She didn't want to disappoint her mother, who had believed so much in Madame Agnes' promises. One Sunday morning, Daisy and her mother dressed in fine clothes for church. Daisy wore a white lace gown and gold earrings, while Madame Agnes tied a wrapper so rich it shimmered. Sarah, however, was left behind. She was told to stay home, wash all the clothes, clean the compound, and cook soup for when they returned. As the car drove out, Sarah stood at the gate watching them leave. Her heart ached. She remembered how, back home, Sundays were the best days. She and her parents would walk to their small church, sing choruses, and eat jollof rice afterward. But here, she was invisible. That afternoon, Daisy returned from church with a foul mood. She claimed Sarah had not cooked the soup well. "Are you blind? Can't you even cook properly? My twins will not eat nonsense," she yelled, throwing the pot to the floor. Hot soup spilled everywhere, and Sarah's hands burned as she tried to clean it. Madame Agnes shook her head, saying, "Village girls are always like this. No training." From that day, Daisy's treatment grew harsher. She would deliberately pour Sarah's water away, hide her food, and make her wash clothes twice. She gave her worn-out clothes to wear, while Daisy's little children had wardrobes full of fine baby outfits. Sarah grew thinner, her once bright eyes now clouded with tiredness. One evening, As Sarah lay on her mat, she overheard Daisy talking to her mother in the living room. "Mommy, I don't trust that girl," Daisy said. "She's always quiet. I think she's hiding something." Madame Agnes replied, "Keep her in check. If she misbehaves, we will send her back with nothing." Sarah's heart pounded. She was far from home, with no phone, no money, and no way to escape. She felt trapped. The following week, something happened that would change everything. Daisy's husband, Mr. Johnson, returned from a business trip. He was a calm, educated man who didn't talk much. When he saw Sarah, he noticed how weak and pale she looked. "Is she okay?" he asked Daisy privately. Daisy rolled her eyes. "She's just lazy. I'm training her. These village girls need a firm hand." Mr. Johnson didn't push further, but his eyes lingered on Sarah longer than usual. He sensed something was wrong. That night, the twins both fell sick with fever. Sarah stayed up all night fanning them and placing wet towels on their heads. Daisy slept soundly. In the morning, when Daisy woke up and saw Sarah sitting weakly on the floor, she shouted, "Why didn't you tell me the children were sick earlier? You want them to die?" She slapped Sarah across the face. Sarah burst into tears. It was the first time she cried openly since arriving. Madame Agnes, who had come to visit, joined in scolding her. "You're becoming a problem, Sarah. You better behave yourself." As the days passed, Sarah's emotional state began to crack. She started hearing her mother's voice in her head, telling her to be strong, but her surroundings whispered otherwise. One afternoon, Daisy accused Sarah of stealing a gold bangle that Daisy had misplaced. She gathered the maids and shouted at Sarah in front of everyone, "Confess now, where did you keep my bangle? You think because you're poor you can take what's not yours?" "I didn't take it, Ma," Sarah said, trembling. Madame Agnes came, furious. "If you don't bring it out, I'll call the police," she threatened. Sarah fell to her knees, crying, "I swear I didn't take anything." Hours later, Daisy found the bangle in one of her handbags. She didn't apologize. Instead, she hissed, "Next time, don't touch my things." That night, something shifted in Sarah. As she lay on her mat staring into the darkness, anger, pain, and despair swelled inside her. She felt invisible and powerless. But deep down, a quiet voice told her, "You are not what they say you are. God sees you." The following week, Daisy traveled briefly, leaving Sarah with Madame Agnes and the children. The rich woman made Sarah work even harder, forcing her to clean the compound twice a day and giving her only half a plate of curry and soup in the evening. One evening, Sarah became dizzy while washing clothes and fell. Madame Agnes stood over her and said coldly, "If you're tired, go back to the village. Nobody begged you to come here." Sarah picked herself up slowly. Her hands were blistered, her legs weak, but her spirit began to form something it never had before, resilience mixed with quiet determination. The morning that everything began to change started quietly. The sun rose slowly over Port Harcourt, painting the sky in gold and pink. Inside Daisy's house, the air was thick with tension. Daisy had returned from her short trip, and she was in a foul mood. She complained about everything, about the twins' clothes, about the food, about how Sarah arranged the living room. "You are becoming useless," Daisy spat. "I don't even know why I agreed to let you come here. You can't do anything right." Sarah kept her head down, scrubbing the tiled floor with a brush until her fingers ached. She was hungry. She hadn't eaten since the previous afternoon. Her stomach made quiet, painful noises. Later that day, Daisy's friends came to visit. They sat in the sitting room, laughing and sipping juice, while Sarah carried trays and served them meat pies and soft drinks. As she walked past Daisy, her hand shook slightly and a drop of juice spilled on Daisy's gown. Daisy exploded. "Are you mad? You poured drink on me." "I'm sorry, Ma." Before she could finish, Daisy slapped her so hard that the glass cup fell from Sarah's hand and shattered on the floor. The friends watched silently, some with pity, some with amusement. Daisy hissed and stormed off to change. Sarah knelt down to pick the broken pieces, tears filling her eyes. She didn't even notice when one shard cut her finger deeply. A drop of blood fell on the white floor. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay on her thin mat, her body aching, her mind spinning. The insults, the hunger, the slap, the lies, all of it sat on her chest like a heavy stone. She began to talk quietly to herself. "They think I'm nothing," she whispered. "They treat me like animal." The next few days grew worse. Daisy began locking the kitchen after every meal, leaving Sarah with nothing but water. She accused her of wasting food. Sarah grew thinner, her uniform wrapper now hanging loosely around her waist. One afternoon, Daisy told Sarah to carry both twins on her back to rock them to sleep. Sarah obeyed, but one of the babies started crying loudly. Daisy rushed in, furious. "What is wrong with you?" she shouted. "Why can't you make them stop crying?" "I'm trying, Ma," Sarah said weakly. "You are trying," Daisy mocked. "You are useless." She snatched one of the babies and pushed Sarah toward the kitchen. "Go and wash the dishes. Leave my children before you infect them with your village spirit." That night, as Sarah lay awake, something inside her broke completely. For the first time in her life, anger began to overtake fear. She felt trapped like a bird in a cage with no food, no family, and no voice. She started talking to herself louder now, as if to a friend. "I will not die here," she said. "I will not." The breaking point came one rainy afternoon. Madame Agnes was away, and Daisy was upstairs. Sarah was left downstairs to clean. Both twins were sleeping in their room. As Sarah passed by the kitchen, she saw a shiny kitchen knife lying on the counter where Daisy had been cutting fruit earlier. She picked it up slowly, holding it in her hand. It was heavier than she expected. She stared at the reflection of her tired face on the blade. Something in her snapped. She walked toward the living room, the knife in her hand, not with the intention to harm anyone, but out of a deep frustration she couldn't express in words. She felt like screaming, but no sound came out. Then one of the twins began to cry from the baby room upstairs. Sarah walked toward the stairs, knife still in her hand, intending to check on the baby. Daisy, hearing the baby's cry, rushed downstairs. The sight of Sarah standing at the bottom of the staircase with a knife in her hand and a strange, distant look in her eyes made Daisy freeze. What are you doing?" Daisy demanded, her voice shaking. Sarah didn't answer. She held the knife firmly, her breath uneven. Daisy's eyes widened in fear. "Sarah, are you mad? Put that thing down." Sarah climbed 2 steps slowly, her eyes locked on Daisy's. She wasn't herself anymore. All the pain she had buried was rising to the surface. "I am tired," she whispered. "I am tired of everything." Daisy screamed, thinking Sarah wanted to hurt her child. She rushed forward and grabbed the baby, then called her mother immediately. Madame Agnes arrived minutes later with 2 security men. "She wanted to harm my child," Daisy shouted, trembling. Sarah stood silently as the 2 men held her arms. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," she said weakly. "I just wanted someone to hear me. Nobody listens to me here." But Daisy and Madame Agnes didn't care. Madame Agnes slapped her. "How dare you? After all we did for you, you turn into witch in my house." You want to kill my grandchildren. They locked Sarah in the small storeroom behind the kitchen that night, without food, without light. She sat on the cold floor, her heart heavy. She thought about her mother, about her father, about the dreams she once had. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But in the darkness, something else was born, strength. She began to pray, quietly at first, then louder. God, you are seeing me, she whispered. You are not blind. You brought me here. You will bring me out. If nobody fights for me, fight for me. For the first time since she arrived, she slept with a strange peace in her heart. The morning after the stormy night in the storeroom was quiet. Sarah sat on the cold floor, her stomach empty, but her spirit unexpectedly calm. The sun crept in through a small crack in the wall, painting a thin line of light across her face. She whispered a soft prayer again. God, I know you hear me. Show up for me. Outside, the household was buzzing. Daisy had told her husband, Mr. Johnson, about the knife incident, but twisted the story. She claimed Sarah had tried to attack the baby out of jealousy. Mr. Johnson listened silently, but something in Daisy's story didn't sit right with him. I want to talk to the girl, he said. Daisy frowned. Why? She's dangerous. Leave her where she is. But Mr. Johnson was firm. He went to the storeroom himself. When he opened the door, he found Sarah sitting quietly, her eyes red from crying but her posture composed. Sarah, he said gently, tell me the truth. What happened yesterday? Sarah looked up at him. She hadn't expected anyone to ask for her side. Slowly, she explained everything, from the day she arrived, the hunger, the insults, the endless work, the lies, and how she had reached a breaking point. She told him she had no intention to harm anyone. She only picked up the knife because she was frustrated and scared. Mr. Johnson listened carefully. When she finished, he sighed deeply. Why didn't you tell me before? I didn't know who to tell, sir, she said softly. They took my phone. I have no way to talk to anyone. I thought if I complained, it would only get worse. His heart tightened. He saw the bruises on her hands, the thinness of her body, and the quiet desperation in her eyes. Don't worry, he said finally. I believe you. He left the storeroom without a word to Daisy. But his attitude changed. He began observing more closely. He noticed how Daisy barked orders at Sarah, how she withheld food, how Madame Agnes insulted her constantly. He watched the way Sarah silently carried heavy buckets of water, cleaned floors, and cared for the twins without rest. One afternoon, Daisy hosted some women from her church for a meeting. Mr. Johnson sat quietly in his study upstairs, but he could hear everything. One of the women asked Daisy, "Is that girl your relative?" Daisy laughed loudly. "Relative? God forbid. She's just a village girl my mom picked. She should be grateful we didn't leave her in the bush. She eats once a day, sleeps in the corridor, yet she still misbehaves." The women laughed uneasily, but one of them, a woman named Mrs. Evelyn, frowned. "Daisy, that doesn't sound right," she said. "She's still a child. You shouldn't talk like that." Daisy waved her hand. "Please, don't pity her. She's lucky we took her in." Mrs. Evelyn didn't respond, but something about Sarah's thin frame and quiet eyes stayed with her. After the meeting, she approached Sarah at the gate and slipped her a small piece of paper with a phone number on it. "If you ever need help, call this number," she whispered. Sarah held the paper tightly. She couldn't call immediately because she still had no phone, but hope flickered like a small candle inside her. Days later, Mr. Johnson finally confronted Daisy and her mother. "I've seen enough," he said firmly. What you're doing to this girl is wicked. She's a minor. You can't starve and beat her like this. Daisy scoffed. Oh please, don't exaggerate. She's just overreacting. Mr. Johnson shook his head. No, I'm reporting this. Madame Agnes laughed mockingly. Report to who? She's from the village. Nobody will believe her. But Mr. Johnson wasn't joking. The next morning, when Daisy and her mother were out, he gave Sarah his old phone and told her to call her parents. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number from memory. Mama, she whispered when her mother answered. Sarah, my daughter, where have you been? We have been worried. Madame Agnes told us you are doing well, her mother cried. Sarah told her everything, her voice shaking but clear. Her mother screamed in shock. My God, what have they done to you? Her father, furious, told a local pastor who connected them to a social worker in Port Harcourt. The call from the social worker came 2 days later. Mr. Johnson arranged for Sarah to meet the woman secretly. When the social worker, Mrs. Evelyn, the same woman from Daisy's church, arrived with officials, she saw Sarah's condition and her eyes filled with tears. This girl has been abused, she said firmly. The confrontation that followed shook the house. Daisy shouted, Madame Agnes insulted, but the officials stood their ground. You kept a minor in servitude, they said. You starved her, denied her education, isolated her from her family. This is a criminal offense. Sarah watched silently as everything unfolded like a dream. Madame Agnes, who once worked like a queen, stammered under questioning. Daisy's face turned pale. Mr. Johnson, though disappointed, stood with the officials. Sarah was taken away from the house that same evening. For the first time in months, she sat in a car without fear. She clutched the little paper Mrs. Evelyn had given her earlier, now a symbol of hope. At the shelter where she was taken, she slept on a real bed. She ate a full plate of rice and stew. She cried silently that night, not out of pain, but relief. God, you heard me, she whispered. Weeks later, Madame Agnes and Daisy faced legal trouble. The community buzzed with the story. People who once admired the rich woman began whispering about how wicked she truly was. Sarah's parents came to Port Harcourt to see her. When her mother hugged her, she held her tightly as if to never let go again. I'm sorry, my child, Mama, Sarah cried. I didn't know they would hurt you. Sarah forgave her. She was simply happy to be free. Mrs. Evelyn, seeing Sarah's intelligence and strength, helped enroll her in a good school. She lived in the shelter for a while, then moved in with a kind foster family who treated her like their own daughter. Sarah returned to school, determined to build a better future. Her pen became her strength. She began sharing her story in churches and community meetings, warning parents not to give their children away blindly. Years later, Sarah graduated with excellent results and earned a scholarship to study law. She wanted to fight for children who couldn't speak for themselves. When she walked across the stage in her graduation gown, her parents were in the crowd, crying tears of joy. She remembered the dark storeroom, the cold nights, the hunger, and she smiled. Her story had begun in pain but ended in victory.